Good evening, everyone. This week's Parsha is Parshas Tazria-Metzora, Tavshin Pei Aleph. I'd like to dedicate this class in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamis Basa Rav Yaakov Eliezer. So what I'd like to do tonight is actually make a connection between this week's Parsha and the period of Sphira that we find ourselves in. We are in the period of Sphira, which is the time that we count the days between Pesach and Shavuos. The Torah gives us a mitzvah to do so, and nowadays, without the Beis HaMikdash, without sacrifices, there's a question whether the mitzvah of counting Sphira is a Torah obligation, rabbinic obligation. But we also know that there is a practice during Sphira for 33 days to observe Avelos, to observe practices of mourning because of the death of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva that the Talmud records took place during this period of time between Pesach and Shavuos. We have a tradition that took place they died over 33 days, and therefore there are 33 days of mourning that we observe for their death. We don't have weddings, we don't listen to music, we don't cut our hair. And I'd like to make a connection between that which we do to remember the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva and this week's Parsha. Now, in this week's Parsha, we have Tzaras. Both Parshas primarily deal with this skin disease of white spots or white spots with other different white and reddish, white and red, greenish. These spots that appear in a person's body are often called leprosy. They're not really leprosy, according to most opinions, because leprosy is a physical disease. And this tsaras, which is called a nega, a plague, is, according to most opinions, a physical manifestation of a spiritual malady. But if a person is stricken with tsaras, then he becomes impure, and things in this, if he touches things, he makes them impure. And a person stricken with tsaras has to go into solitude. He has to go into quarantine, not be in touch with people until the plague goes away. And that's what this week's Parsha primarily deals with. Tsaras can strike a person in their body, in their clothing, in their home. And the Talmud in Erechin, Tazria-Metzora 16b, says the following: Al Shiva Devarim Negayim Bayin. A nega, the nega of tsaras that we've been mentioning, can come upon a person because of 7 possible things. 7 possible things that a person did wrong. A lashon hara, it can come from speaking lashon hara, speaking derogatorily about other people. Val shvichas damim, for committing murder. Val shvua shav, for swearing falsely. Val gili arayis, for having illicit relationships. Val gatzes haruach, for being haughty. Val agezel, for stealing. Val tsaras ha'ayin. Tsaras ha'ayin literally translated is narrowness of the eye. But Rashi explains what that means is a person, a tsar ayin, person who has a narrowness of vision, is a person who is stingy. As Rashi says, tsaras ayin shatzara eino ba'acherim, he is stingy about others, he doesn't look good upon others. V'namahane shechenav mikelav al yidei she'ela, and he doesn't benefit his neighbors by lending his articles out to them. So the 7th cause of tsaras, the Gemara mentions, is tsaras ayin, being stingy. And the commentary the Gemara has a scriptural source, or scriptural allusion to the connection between tsaras and these 7 things. And the connection, or the source, that tsaras ayin, the stinginess, is a cause for being a tsaras, is based on a pasuk in this week's Parsha, Perek Yadalit, pasuk Lamed Hey, chapter 14, verse 35, that reads, Ki savayu al eretz Kanana she'ani nosein lachem la'achuza. When you come to the land of Canaan that I'm giving you as an inheritance, v'nosati negat tsaras beveis eretz achuzaschem, I shall place the plague of tsaras in the home of the land of your inheritance. Uba ashaloi habayis, and to one to whom the house is, meaning the owner of the house will come, V'gid la'kohen leimar, and he shall tell the Kohen, the priest, saying, Kenaga lir li babayis, something that appears like a plague of tsaras has appeared to me in my house. So this is talking about, as I mentioned, the plague of tsaras that could strike a person in their house. And it's from these words, uba shaloi habayis, which means the person who owns the house is going to come tell the Kohen to come inspect what's going on. Because anytime tsaras shows up, you need a Kohen to inspect it to see, is it tsaras or not? Now, the Torah says, uba shaloi habayis, the one to whom the house is will come. That's not your typical way of saying the owner of the house will come. And therefore the Gemara says is that the Torah is alluding to in these words, asher lo habayis, if the house is to him, we're talking about a person who the house is only to him. He keeps his house and its contents only to himself. That's the person we're talking about who is now dealing with the plague of tsaras. So this is where we have a scriptural allusion to the connection between being stingy and the plague of tsaras. And the commentary of the Parsha says that actually the 7 causes actually correspond to the 7 types or the 7 ways that tsaras can come out. And the same way that the illusion of tsaras being connected to stinginess comes from the plague of tsaras that can strike someone in their home, Marsha says that is a type of tsaras that you get being stingy. When you're stingy, the tsaras that you get is the tsaras that comes in your home. What's the connection? So the Marsha says the connection is because a person is stingy, won't let a poor person into his house. So he's saying you're not letting the poor person into your house, the plague will strike your house. Others explain it that the connection between the plague of the stinginess and the plague to your house is because, as Rashi says, the person is stingy, doesn't want to lend out his objects, his things to his neighbors. So what happens? His neighbor comes and says, can I borrow your hammer? So what does he say? No. He doesn't say no. He said, oh, I don't have a hammer. I lost my hammer. The hammer broke. Can I borrow your shovel? Oh, my shovel broke. He basically, in order not to have to lend out his articles, he makes up a story that he doesn't have them. So the Torah says, oh, that's what you're doing? I'm gonna expose you. I'm gonna show everybody, you're gonna have to show everybody that you really have those things. Why is that? Because actually, Torah said, the Mishnah says that when you come to this Kohen, you tell the Kohen, I think I have a neg in my house. So the Kohen the Kohen says, the Torah says that they clean out the house. Before the Kohen comes, you remove everything from the house. Why is that? Because if the Kohen walks in and he sees the nega and he sees the spot and he says that's tsaras, then everything in the house becomes impure. And therefore, the Kohen says take everything out first so that it doesn't become tamei. So if you have tsaras in your house, it comes out that you take everything out. You're taking everything out. It means everybody's going to see what you have. So you know that hammer that you say you didn't have? There it is. You know that shovel that broke? There it is. Basically, you are being stingy. The punishment is the Torah will bring tsaras to your house, and you'll have to show everybody that you really do have it, and that'll be very embarrassing. So that's the connection between stinginess and the plague of tsaras in the house. And as the Maharsha says, that's the kind of tsaras you get for being stingy. And the connection being the 2 explanations we just gave. Okay, so we have this trait of tsaras anu, being stingy, as one of the causes for a person being punished with the plague of tsaras. This trait of being stingy has a connection to the death of the students of Rabbi Akiva. And we'll bring that out by discussing what went on here with Rabbi Akiva's students. So the Gemara in Yevamis, the Talmud in Tractate Yevamis, Samach Beis Amid Beis 62b, says the following: Shneim Asar Elef Zugim Talmidim Hayulo Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, the great famous sage Rabbi Akiva, had 12,000 pairs of students. Migevas Adan Tifras, one end of Israel to the other. V'kulan meisim b'perek echad, and they all died during one period of time. Why is that? Because they didn't show honor to each other. They didn't act respectfully with each other. What does that mean exactly? How bad was it? We don't know. But clearly they were behaving with each other in a way that was disrespectful, at the very least, for how Torah scholars should be treating each other. And when they all died, the world was desolate. Until Rabbi Akiva went to our rabbis that lived in the south, and he taught them. Who were those rabbis? The Talmud enumerates their names. Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Elazar ben Shamua, and they're the ones who, again, Rabbi Akiva taught Torah to them, and they're the ones who reestablished Torah in the Jewish people. And when did this take place? Tana, the Brisa teaches us, we learned, Kula meis Pesach v'Atzeres, they all died between Pesach and Shavuos. Okay? So the Talmud tells us that the reason they died was because they did not act respectfully with each other. So let's see what the commentaries have to say about that. So there is a commentary on the Talmud called the Ben Yehoyada. The Ben Yehoyada asks the following question. He asks, why does the Torah describe the students as 12,000 pairs? You should just say 24,000. Now, 12,000 pairs would allude to the idea that we have pairs. We have what we call charusis. We have study partners. Everybody has a study partner. And as someone suggested, being that the sin was they didn't act respectfully with each other, that was something that was very, that came out. That was a big problem, especially when everyone is supposed to be studying with each other. If you don't act respectfully with each other, you're not going to be able to study together with someone. So it adds to the point of not acting respectfully with each other. The Ben Yehoyada gives the following answer. Why the Talmud stresses it was 12,000 pairs. So he says that, yes, the point is to bring out that Rabbi Akiva had them in pairs with each other, which would have been the typical way of doing things anyway. One can argue. But the Gemara is stressing it according to Ben Yehoyada because he says Rabbi Akiva was very wise. The Haven Baruch Kodshay, and he understood with his divine wisdom, with his divine inspiration, with his divine perception, that there was something going on here. There was a problem here. Sheyesh lamidas kina. It could very well be that he noticed the lack of respect. But what was the problem? Where was it coming from? And that he understood with his divine wisdom that there was the trait of jealousy amongst them. Apparently, it wasn't as obvious as anybody could look at. You needed Rabbi Akiva to be able to figure out what was going on here. So he did something. He decided he'll pair them up. In what way? Katan im gadol. He paired them up in a special way. What was the way? To pair up a younger scholar with an older scholar, meaning with a not as advanced scholar with a more advanced scholar. It's well understood that the younger scholar, the smaller scholar, would be giving respect to the older scholar. And that would take away any issues of jealousy because the setup between them is a setup that Rabbi Akiva figured would be a setup that there shouldn't be jealousy. And nonetheless, it didn't help. Still didn't help. The younger ones still are trying to best the older ones, trying to show them, oh, you're not so great. And the older ones weren't happy maybe when the younger ones were kind of pointing out things that they didn't realize. It didn't help. That's why he says that the Gemara calls them 12,000 pairs is because Rabbi Akiva made them into pairs, into special pairs for their benefit, but it still didn't work. But the Ben Yehoyada is saying that they didn't act respectfully with each other the cause of that being kina, jealousy. Even amongst Torah scholars, when they're together and they're studying together, a competition comes up. Competition doesn't have to be bad, but sometimes it can get out of hand. It created jealousy. Each one wanted to be the best one. And again, these were very great people, but even in these great people on their level, this existed. Maybe in a much more refined way than it would exist by us, but it existed, the Talmud says. And then it existed in the fact that they didn't respect each other, which means that there was an interaction that showed disrespect at some level. The Ben Yehoyada says the source of it was jealousy. The Kav HaChaim, who was a Sephardic sage, in his book Kav HaChaim, he goes through halachas, the practical Jewish law, and he talks about the practice that we have of mourning for the students of Rabbi Akiva, and he says, why do we do this? The reason why we commemorate their death, in order that we should distance ourselves from hatred, v'akina, and from jealousy, v'taiva, from desire, v'gaiva, from arrogance, v'kaved, honor-seeking, v'liknas midas ahava, to acquire the trait of love, v'anava, humility, v'shalom, and peace. So he elaborates a little bit more. He says there was a lot of issues here, all related. Animosity, jealousy, honor-seeking, arrogance. That's what was here. And this is what we're being told to remember what that caused and distance ourselves from that and to work on acquiring friendship, humility. And V'lachein kasav b'shar kavana daf aleph ayin gimel, that's exactly what Shar Kavanis is, I think comes from the Arizal. To be very careful and to teach and to make sure during this period of time the friendship that should exist amongst those who study Torah together. Because just as the students of Rabbi Akiva are studying Torah together, but within that environment still developed this jealousy that brought about their death, and all these other bad traits that brought about their death, that's something that now amongst present scholars, it should be focused on, that they shouldn't fall into the same trap, the same problems that the students of Rabbi Akiva did. So the Kav HaChaim elaborates more, and it says the same thing, just a little bit more elaboration of animosity and jealousy and honor-seeking and arrogance. All these things were present. And these are all really manifestations of jealousy, which then manifested itself in a certain level of disrespect for one another. Okay, now this is how the Talmud in Yevamos describes the students, what they did wrong. Describes it as not acting respectfully with each other, and we have these commentaries saying the cause of that was basically jealousy. The Medrash in Koheles, in the book of Ecclesiastes, the Medrash there brings down this episode, and it describes a little bit differently. And it's going on a verse in the book of Koheles that says, "B'boker zara ez zarecha," in the morning plant your seeds, u'be'erev al tanach yodach, and in the evening don't rest your hand. And it's talking about things that you do during your youth, keep doing it throughout your lifetime, even into your old age. You had students when you were young, keep raising students, keep teaching students even in your older age, because one never knows when success will really come. So it's here Rabbi Akiva talks about his students. Rabbi Akiva said, Shneim asar alafim talmidim hayuli. I had 12,000 students. There's 12,000 pairs in the Medrash. 12,000 students, migavas varan tifras, from one part of Israel to the other. The kulan mesu b'chayai ben Pesach latzeres, and they all died in my lifetime between Pesach and Shavuos. What the Gemara in Yevamos describes, the Medrash is Rabbi Akiva describes it talking personally. They died in my lifetime, he said. Ubasayif hamidu li shiva. At the end, I had 7 students. The Talmud said 5. The Medrash says 7. They Elohena, these are they. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Nechemiah, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yosef, B'Shimon ben Yochai, Relezer ben Oshmer Agli, Rechon Asandler. Omar lehem. Rabbi Akiva said to them, Harishainim loy mesu el mipnei shahaisa eineim tzara b'Torah ze lozeh. Your predecessors died because eineim tzara, they were stingy in Torah with one another. Atem l'siyukein, make sure you don't do the same. So here, the Medrash says that the problem was that they were stingy with each other in Torah. The commentary of Eitz Yosef explains that this means Koloimar shayu soinim zelozeh, they disliked each other. So you write some lahana zelozeh balim, and they didn't want to benefit each other in Torah study. So again, they disliked each other, probably because of jealousy. But the main issue, what manifested itself from this dislike, this animosity, was that they were stingy with each other when it came to Torah. They didn't want to share their Torah with the other. They didn't want to, as he says, they didn't want to benefit each other in learning. They didn't want, meaning, everyone has what to add when they study with a study partner. And to a certain degree, they didn't want to benefit the other one. They didn't want to give everyone what they had. They were being stingy. They wanted to hold on to their Torah. Now, so this is the connect. This is where we find Tsaras Ayin, stinginess by Tsaras, and now stinginess by the students of Rabbi Akiva. But it's a little bit different, because the stinginess that we have by Tsaras, when a person is stingy, they don't want to lend things out to people, as Rashi says. My understanding of that is a stingy person could be like, if you have it, fine, go ahead, have it. Just don't take mine. You want to hold on to your things. In Torah, it's not going to just be, well, I want to hold on to my Torah. If I want to just hold on to my Torah, if I don't want to benefit you from my Torah, that's more because of the fact that I actually don't want you to have it. Because because a person who doesn't want to benefit someone else from the Torah knowledge that he has is not going to do that, because he thinks if the other person gains that knowledge, so you won't have one up on him anymore. You won't have that higher status that you want to have over him, because if he has that knowledge, then he's like you. It's more about the other person not having it, because that raises the other person's status, which you don't want, because you feel that makes you lose out. So according to the Medrash and Koheles, the problem of Tsaras Ayin that existed by the students of Rabbi Akiva was the fact they didn't want to share their Torah with one another. And that was because, again, that had to do with jealousy, had to do with honor seeking. But what the Talmud describes as not acting respectfully with each other, the Talmud is saying that, while they died, they didn't act respectfully with each other. That was the bottom line. That was the act that they were deserving punishment for. And according to the way, and it would seem that the Medrash and Koheles is saying it could be interpreted differently, and that is that it's not about how they treated each other, were they respectful, not respectful. They didn't want to benefit each other. They didn't want to share from their learning. They wanted to give over whatever they had to someone else, because they felt that if they did that, they would lose out. And that was what they did wrong. That was why they were deserving of punishment. So what we have here are two forms of stinginess. The stinginess when we don't want to give away our things to others. Others may need, other ones want to benefit. And sometimes we're stingy. Now, you've got really stingy people who don't want to lend things out at all because they have this thing about holding on to their own things. But there are other times that we're not so ready to part with what we have to help others. It can manifest itself in tzedakah, in helping people. Maybe we don't want to give up our time for others. We want to hold on to our time for ourselves. And then there's a form of stinginess when, on a spiritual level, we think that someone else, if they have what we have spiritually, whether it be in mitzvahs, whether it be in Torah knowledge, a person can think, they're gonna, he's gonna have a higher status. He's gonna have the same status as me. He's gonna have the same thing as me. If he knows what I know, if he does the mitzvahs that I do, then I don't have one up on him. then I'm not higher in status than than that person. And that's the problem that's a problem of thinking that's the problem of kinna, of envy, of jealousy, in the sense that a person thinks that, what he has, he's taking away from me. And we know that's not what our emunah, our faith and our trust in Hashem is about. That's about understanding that whatever we have comes from Hashem. He knows what we need. What we have is what we need, and that's what's good for us. And what we don't have is not meant to be for us, and it's not for our best to have it. And if this is, as the Medrash said, the cause for why Rabbi Akiva's students died, that means that's something we have to work on now. Now is the time to work on understanding that what we give to others, whether it be in a physical sense, in a spiritual sense, we don't lose out on that in any way whatsoever. If we think we do, then we're suffering the same problem the students of Rabbi Akiva did. Whether it's the source of why they act disrespectful to each other, or whether it's the source of why they didn't want to benefit the other person with their Torah, because they think that it makes them lose out on something. Deep down, this is something that manifests itself on many different levels. But deep down, a person can feel that way, and therefore they won't be as forthcoming or as willing to share from themselves for others because of that. That was a cause for tzaras. That was the cause of the death of Rabbi Akiva's students. And therefore, now is a period of time for us to work on that. Not to be jealous, not to be envious, not to worry about what we give from ourselves to others will make us lose out because we won't be at a higher status in some way than them. But to realize that, on the contrary, we should love each other and want to share with what we can with each other, and not to worry about we're going to lose out. We don't lose out. Whenever we share and help people and create friendship and create love, that's what we gain from. And not to worry about losing because of what we give from ourselves to others. That's the lesson from tzaras, and that's the lesson we have to think about now during the time where we observe the mourning from Rabbi Akiva students. We never lose out from helping somebody else. There's no place for jealousy. There's no place for being stingy. There's no place for not wanting to benefit someone from what we have, because we never lose out from that. We only gain. Have a wonderful evening.